Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show, brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. Hope you'll check out progressivechristianity.org, all the wonderful resources there. You'll follow them online, and you'll also follow us online on social media and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Mark. How are you doing today, Mark?
What's going on, Caleb? I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this next entry into the Marvel Studios lineup.
Me too, because today we are talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And I know, Mark, that you have been looking as forward to this as I have for a long, long time. So I'm glad we finally got it. But hey, before we get into it, we've got to let you know, if you haven't seen it, it's only been out for a few days. We will spoil it for you. So if you are wanting to go into the movie theater fresh, then you might want to push pause, go and watch it and come back. Or if you want some theological insight whenever you go to see it, you might want to listen, and then you can go in and you can say, hey, Mark and Caleb were talking about that. Hey,
excellent.
We always start off with a drink.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait to hear what drink you've got today, Mark. What'd you decide to do?
I'll be honest, it's not all that exciting, but what I decided to do was in the Guardian of the Galaxies, who is known for its soundtrack, probably my favorite song in terms of its use and when we first heard it was the song Cherry Bomb. So my drink is a drink called a cherry bomb. You can see it's a really bright and like a cherry. And it's nothing more than cherry lemonade and bourbon. So I'm drinking a cherry bomb. How about you?
It's really hard to go wrong with that. Okay, so I was inspired by a scene in the movie where they are in a house on Counter Earth, and they are given a refreshment.
Oh, yeah, the blue soda thing.
The blue soda thing. Yeah, so I've got a blue soda thing. That's actually what I've called it, the blue soda thing. And it is, you like it? So it's vanilla vodka, blue curacao, and Sprite, a blue soda thing that is spiked. Cheers to you, Mark.
Cheers to you, sir. Oh, yeah, I'm going to enjoy that.
Good. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hey, let's have a few more sips and let's come back and get into it.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Won't you shine?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our Geek Out segment of the show. And I tell you, we allot a certain amount of time that we usually stick pretty closely to. And I can tell you, there is no way that we're going to cover everything we would like to cover. We could geek out about this for an hour straight, I have a feeling.
And we would.
We absolutely would. For those who have not seen the show, or maybe are not even familiar with Guardians of the Galaxy but are still listening, I'm just going to give you the official plot synopsis of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, in which they say, in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, our beloved band of misfits are looking a bit different these days. Peter Quill, still reeling from the loss of Gamora, must rally his team around him to defend the universe along with protecting one of their own. A mission that, if not completed successfully, could quite possibly lead to the end of the Guardians as we know them.
Bum, bum, bum.
Absolutely. So I want to start a little bit by putting this movie in conversation with the other ones. So I'm curious, what did you think of the first two Guardian movies? And then where does this one rank within them for you?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. I love Guardians of the Galaxy, and I I think I, like most people, wasn't super familiar with them before they came out.
Yeah,
You know, I know this
absolutely.
was they were kind of minor characters, comic
Very
book
much so.
characters, and James Gunn, I think, did a great job of finding their quirkiness and
Yeah.
playing into that, and it was a lot of fun to watch. And so I was just instantly kind of obsessed with Guardians, and so I loved the first two movies, and I loved this one too. I just enjoyed them all. In terms of how I would rank them, I
Yeah.
think I would go one. I think the first one's my top one.
Yeah.
3,
Yeah.
2. Yeah, I think I
Gotcha.
would put
All
this
right.
new one in the middle.
Yeah.
How about you? Where do you
Well,
put it?
I'm with you. I absolutely
Yeah.
loved the whole idea and what he's done with
Mhm.
it, how he's got these broken folks from broken homes choosing each other and saving the universe as they
Mhm.
learn how to be family together. I love the whole storyline. It's absolutely fantastic. Um, I'll say the first Guardians is one of my all-time favorite movies. I
Mhm.
think it's one of those movies that's made near perfection.
Mhm.
2, I liked a lot. I found it very entertaining. I love the soundtrack, and I found it a lot of fun to follow along. But I didn't put it anywhere quite as
Right.
near as the ranking I put on 1.
Yeah.
This one, I put just barely above 2. There's lots
Yes.
that I
So same
love about it.
order,
Same
but
order, but
with some
maybe a little
nuance
bigger
there.
gap. Maybe a little bigger
Yeah.
gap.
Right.
Like I put 3 and 2. They're close. They're really close
Mhm.
for me, but they are a pretty good drop off of the first movie, which I thought was just brilliant filmmaking and one of my
Yes.
all-time my favorites.
Yeah.
But I that isn't to say I didn't enjoy this movie. I loved this movie.
Yeah.
It's the old line, I laughed, I cried, it became a part of me. I mean, I really did all of that. It was
Yep.
so good, so good. Uh, but before we get
From a
too far in,
superhero movie. A
yeah,
superhero movie, Mark,
right,
right?
exactly,
That
yeah.
that's
It's like
how wonderful these
not,
movies are.
not just a superhero movie that I laughed and cried, it became a part of me,
Yeah.
but a superhero movie that, at least in this iteration, and we're going to get to this question in a minute,
Yeah.
even linking backwards, a superhero movie whose primary star was an animated raccoon and
Right?
emoted as much emotion as anybody in the entire film. It was
Yeah.
absolutely
Mhm.
stunning what they did with that character this time around. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah. I agree.
absolutely amazing. So, but let's real quickly though. So you didn't rank it quite as high as the first one.
Right.
What things in it caused you to kind of like say, okay, that could have been done better, or this was something I didn't quite think landed? What were your places there? And then we can get into our real deep, just having fun talking about how much we loved it.
Yeah, so I think first of all, one of the reasons that that I ranked it above the second one is that
Mhm.
I think it was larger in scale and scope, and it was
Absolutely.
a good epic conclusion to
Yeah.
this trilogy, and I liked it as a conclusion, and
Yeah.
I thought the scale was larger, and so that's why for me it was not just a little bit above the second one, but quite a bit above the second one. But I don't think that it did as much in terms of establishing and developing a lot of the characters. I think for Rocket, we got a lot of character
Mhm.
development, and I loved the exploration of Rocket's character because we haven't gotten a ton of that.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, to see a raccoon,
Ah,
pulling you in, and I mean, how great is it that finally, after all this protest, more than 3 films, because we've got the
right.
Avengers films too, where I'm
Yeah.
not a raccoon, where he finally embraces Rocket Raccoon.
Raccoon. Yeah.
I think in terms of some of the character developments, there was some stuff that maybe need to be adjusted. So, but I felt like in terms of pacing, I felt like it was good. I felt
Mhm.
like the visuals were good.
Oh,
I
the
don't
visuals
have
were
a
incredible.
ton of criticism with the
Yeah.
film.
Well,
But
I,
you,
I,
what are you thinking, Mark?
Well, I actually disagree. I thought the characters
Yeah.
were all handled perfectly. I loved
Yeah.
how we were kind of on the back end of their story arches, and
Yeah.
each one of them felt like they had a satisfactory kind of wrapping up of their story, their character's story arc. I really appreciated that. Some of my issues were one, I did think that the pacing, particularly at the very beginning, was a little off. It felt like it was plodding along. And if you're developing a backstory or a new character storyline, I don't have much problem with that. I appreciate taking the time to do that. And if anything, I kind of feel like that would have been a great place. One of my criticism is the High Evolutionary, the main bad guy here. I needed more of his backstory to understand why he is the way he is. That felt like he could have been a more developed character. So it was, for me, the pacing was a little slow, and I'm fine. If they would have done something different with it, I might have liked it. I also felt like the flashbacks had kind of weird cuts. There were moments where it felt like almost like jarring, the cut. And sometimes you're doing it for a purpose. It didn't feel like there was a purpose in it. And then my last critique, and there's going to be people who hate me for this, I really didn't care for the soundtrack the way I have cared about the soundtrack up until now. And that's both the orchestral soundtrack and the songs. The lyrics of the songs were perfect and unbelievable how they matched up to what was going on. But the energy of the songs didn't bring to the movie what they used to. I mean, you had the Beastie Boy, No Sleep Till Brooklyn. So that was a great one that did bring the energy. There were just so many, I think, that didn't land squarely for me. So
I was there for the soundtrack, man. I think this is the challenge of Marvel. Here you got two people who love the series, who love Marvel, and who fall in different places on the character development and the pacing. This is the challenge, man.
Right? That's fair.
Trying to please the fans.
It's very fair. It's very fair. It's very fair. And I'll be honest, and I'm not making this as a joke like I sometimes do. I think the age difference might have to do something about it, because they brought in songs from the late 1990s, early 2000s, which were songs I liked, but they just didn't feel like as much of a throwback kind of, they're pulling these songs, which is sort of what was great about the first one, is it felt like they were pulling back these old songs and doing the soundtrack and this kind of anyway. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. So one of the things that Gunn has said is that from the very beginning, all three of these, that Rocket was the quote secret protagonist of the whole show, of the entire trilogy. What do you think he meant by that? I mean, we even have Lila, who says, "My beloved raccoon, the stories was yours all along. You just didn't know it." Which I felt like was him trying to tell the audience, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And that's a quote we're going to come back to and fill in a little bit more. But why do you think he called Rocket the secret protagonist of the whole thing?
Rocket was secretly the one who kind of brought everyone together, and you don't expect it because he's always he's gruff and he's kind of brutal throughout the series. And in this one in particular, as you see his story unfold, and I mean, it's about a raccoon gaining like sentience, but I mean, the emotional weight of a raccoon gaining sentience really kind of pulls. It really pulls you in, and you care about those animals. You want those animals to make it, and I felt more emotionally attached to that band of 4 animals who are gaining sentience than to a lot of the characters in the MCU, as we're going with them. So I think that ultimately it is Rocket who really solidifies the relationship of the Guardians, even though they've got a strong relationship before and already kind of see themselves as family. It is, in this one in particular, it's going to save Rocket that brings them all back together and kind of solidifies their place as a family who doesn't even necessarily need to be together to continue to be family. So that's kind of where I see Rocket. How about you? What do you think?
I think that's definitely part of it. Gunn's also said that when he was approached about doing it, that Rocket's what made him decide. Like when he was first approached, he wasn't sure. And then on the ride home in the car, he thought about Rocket, and he thought about how sad his backstory was and how, and he was like, that's something I can work with. And so I think Rocket is sort of the reflection of everybody that comes together, and frankly, the reflection of all of us. It's just more obvious. It's more obvious that he is broken. You can see it on his body, and it's obvious that he's mad about it. But it's also sort of obvious that he's trying to figure out where he fits in. Right. And when you look at each one of the characters, that's all of them. And so for me, it's almost like he's saying he is the mirror that all of them see themselves in, which brings them all together for him. So a couple of questions here. First of all, high evolutionary. Who's worse, him or Thanos?
Okay. So this is hard, man. Okay. For different reasons, and my mental process here that I so eloquently articulated in is Thanos snaps his fingers, right, and gets rid of half of everybody, half of everybody, right, but he does it ultimately for what he interprets as noble reasons, right, to actually save the universe. But obviously that's problematic. But he's going through and he causes more damage. The high evolutionary sees himself as God. But
does he not also think that he's wanting a better world, just like Thanos? I don't.
So he says that he wants to create a perfect race and a perfect society. As perfect species in a perfect society, but I don't think he actually wants to do that. I don't think he has any interest.
Rocket literally says he doesn't. Rocket says he doesn't want to make the world a better place. He just doesn't like the way it is. So I'm with you.
I think he is only interested in his own self-service. Yeah. And so that's why I'm saying in terms of motivation,
I agree.
I think the high evolutionary is worse. In terms of actual impact, I think it's Thanos. But I think the high evolutionary has the capacity to make things even worse.
Completely agree. Okay, next question.
Yeah.
Adam Warlock. I got two on him. We're going to keep these kind of focused and brief. Is he supposed to be... Yeah, please stop. Is he supposed to be Marvel's Shazam?
We'll have to see.
He's kind of childish and he's got all these superpowers, but he really is kind of a doofus. I don't know. It feels like he is.
We'll have to see. We'll see how they use him in the next movie.
Yeah. With a more serious question, though.
Yeah.
What was the actual value of him being in the storyline? I mean, if you take him out, how does it change anything? I mean, to me, he felt like an annoyance. It's like, why do you keep why is that guy here? Like, I was into this and now this guy's showing up and it's throwing everything off, but you're not really doing anything with him. There's no, I don't know.
He's the catalyst at the beginning that set them on their adventure, but the catalyst stuck around. That was the annoyance of it. I think you're right. He didn't have any other purpose other than to get the
and there's nothing he did that you couldn't have given to another character. Ultimately, I would say.
True.
I mean,
but
you could have. It wouldn't have been beautiful. Wouldn't have been beautiful if Gamora, who had this kind of hate relationship with Star-Lord, had been the one who saved him when he was about to freeze in space. They could have set that up. Anybody could have hurt Rocket. I just feel like it was a kind of a useless character. I don't know. Okay, last question before we move on to our next segment.
Yes.
Is it bad that I'd rather see a new movie about Gamora and her Ravager family than about the new Guardians that they set up?
No, because I felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean,
I think part of it though is Zoe Saldana. She's just charismatic and she's such a great actress that I'd watch anything she's in.
But also, I just think the characters with the Ravager family are much more interesting, even though I'm not a big Sylvester Stallone fan. The rest of them are so much more interesting. Yeah. And the Guardians that they set up are kind of like, man, I'm glad Groot and Rocket are still together. I don't know. It just
and the rest of it feels like B team. I think that's one of Marvel's biggest problems right now in this current phase is it feels like it's B or C team coming out, and I think it's harder
Right.
for people to get excited about all of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's definitely one of the struggles that they have. We've lost all of the heroes that created the Marvel universe, and they're trying to figure out how to bring in new ones, and they're kind of stumbling a bit. All right, we could go on and on. We could geek out more and more, but it's important that we get on to our theological and political perspectives on this fun and very good movie. So let's take a quick break, have another drink, and come back on the other side of the drop.
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are moving into our Theopolitico segment, where we will talk about theology and politics of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So this was a really fun movie, a lot there, and the high evolutionary antagonist really caught my attention, Mark, and he really made me think about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So one of the things that he says when he's on the bridge of his ship is, "There is no God. That's why I stepped in." I'm curious, do you see this happening anywhere in our society or in the church? People taking the place of God and making decisions as if they are God.
Well, let's take it in two separate takes. First political, then let's go to the church. Yeah, clearly politically, particularly in the more conservative arm of our politics in the United States, there are folks who think that they speak for God, and or at least try to use the voice of God. And I suspect that the fear of God that their supposed literal interpretation of the Bible should bring to them isn't actually present. They probably doubt that there is a God and just recognize God as a great manipulative tool, the opiate of the masses, as it were.
Mhm.
And so we see them trying to play God in the way that they limit the rights, the human rights of a lot of folks, and they're doing it very much in a non-Christian way. The church, though, I actually, one of my big criticisms of the church is that the church has become God itself. That I call it churchianity rather than Christianity. It's folks who are worshiping the system and the hierarchy and the institution rather than trying to understand this thing that we call God and be in a relationship with it and have it impact how we act in the world. Instead, we see folks that are just defending the church and using it as a way to, this plays right back into the movie, feel like they are somehow better than and have a more evolved life than other folks, which is one of the main themes of particularly of the third installment of Guardians of the Galaxy. The high evolutionary is very much believing that there is a way of creating a fully superior race, and it's very clear in terms, as far as I'm concerned, that part of the message here is that we are all sort of beautiful in our brokenness. I don't like the word brokenness, but in the places that we might call faults, that's sort of what makes us great. You've got the high evolutionary trying to eliminate faults, and then you have the Guardians of the Galaxy who are all learning to own their faults and live into them and see each other as beautiful in spite of them, or maybe just because of them. So I think the church is losing its way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in terms of politics, certainly that the folks on the right have just exploited religion in a way to gain power, and I don't think they care one way or another about religion or about God. I think it is just exactly as you said, a way to get people to vote against themselves, to make people into single issue voters. and to get people away from asking really kind of tough political questions. So I think absolutely that's how we're using religion in this country. And I think in terms of the church, I think we make the church into an idol. I think we make the Bible into an idol.
Absolutely.
I think we're not really interested in seeing God in the faces of our neighbors. We as Christianity has been practiced in the United States, much more interested in using the Bible and the church as a weapon than as a tool to worship God. And so I think that if I'm accused of heresy a lot, and I know you are too, Mark. And I think if there's a heresy, it's that.
Yeah, you're
That's
right.
the heresy. People worshiping the church and the Bible.
Preach, brother, preach.
I love it.
I'm with you.
Okay, so I knew you would be somehow
absolutely.
or another. I don't know why. Okay, so this high evolutionary guy, man. So he creates a better world on counter Earth. He says it's going to be a better world, right? But it really is just like a 1980s Earth with like animal people. So, and Star-Lord points this out to him, right?
Absolutely.
It's an
Not the octopus guy
meth.
drugs off of the selling meth through the road.
Yeah, is this a better world? So, hey, is it possible to create a better world? And are human beings the problem?
Isn't that an interesting question? So, is it possible to create a better world? Yes, but it has nothing to do with perfecting people. It has everything to do with learning to love people, even with what we might otherwise judge as faults, to seeing them for who they fully are and loving them in all of it. Yes, we can create a better world if we can figure out how to do that. Are humans at fault? Well, yeah, we are, but that doesn't mean that if whatever would replace us wouldn't also be at fault. There is an amount of hubris of being on the highest piece on the evolutionary scale that definitely happens. But love is the answer, man. You've got to go back to figuring out how to love. So humans are at fault, but they are also the potential for creating heaven on earth, for understanding that we are all reflections of this thing we call God, and that there is beauty in each of us, and that provides great potential to love all folks. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think human beings are the problem, and human beings are also a part of the answer. That if we can get over ourselves and we can try to come together, as you said, I think that we can accomplish a lot. And I think that was Jesus's message primarily.
Absolutely,
is that if we can stop getting so wrapped up in the stuff that we think is important. For him, it was legalism and it was purity laws and things like that. But if we can stop getting wrapped up in whatever it is that we think is significant, maybe in our world it's race or it's sexual orientation or it's gender identity, or say if we can stop trying to define people in one particular way and we can see people as sacred as they are, then I think that that we can create something better, what Jesus called the reign of God on earth. I think it's possible to create that if we can get over ourselves. But man, it is hard to get over ourselves.
It is, and it's particularly hard when you have politicians and commercials and everything else that we get exposed to trying to encourage us to feel like we are better than other people. And that, I think, is part of what the warning of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is really about, is that this high evolutionary is trying to create this world that's so much better than all the stuff that exists. And that's his main folly. Like, that's not going to happen. The only way you do it is by being real about what is there and loving it no matter what, seeing God in all things.
And I think back to your earlier point about Rocket being the heart and soul of this, I think the moment when that is driven home in the movie is whenever we see that despite all these perfect beings that he has created, none of them possesses the uniqueness that is Rocket. And that is what he needs is the imperfection of Rocket to make his perfect society a little bit more perfect.
Absolutely. And what Lila says about Rocket and why he's more special is interesting. She says there are the hands that make up. And then there are the hands that guide the hands. Like they're the hands that do what we're doing, but they're the hands that guide the hands, which seems to be, am I not wrong, that there's the hands that makes us, and then there's the hands that guide the hands. It seems that that's pointing to some higher being, some divine something that guides what happens. Was that your take on that, and what's the
that was an
there,
interesting, that whole sequence was interesting because this is when Rocket is dying and he's going, of course, towards the light and to Lila, and so I think that it is making that commentary on him joining his friends and some kind of a higher being, and so that's what I read into that there was some kind of greater plan kind of thing.
Is that helpful, though? I mean, is that really like that was the moment where I was like, oh,
it's not helpful.
Why did we have
It's not helpful. As we've already talked, as we often talk about, that even though you are Presbyterian, Mark, and a good Presbyterian believes in predestination. That's as we both agree that's never a helpful line of thinking, really, to think that we're not ultimately kind of in control of. There are things that are beyond our control, but I think ultimately our own self-drivenness and our own control of ourselves is ultimately what it's about.
And it's so weird to do that in the midst of a movie whose larger story seems to be about how important it is to recognize that we all have faults, we all have our issues, and that we should accept and love all of them. And then to sit in, but there's this one person who's a little more special than everybody else, and the divine is the one that made that happen. I just felt off. I don't know.
I agree with you, and I think it feels off in any movie, and I think especially if you're looking for bad theology. Sometimes, a lot of times the good theology comes whenever they're not trying to make a theological statement at all. But whenever people try to make an explicit theological statement, it's almost always bad theology that we get. Hey, I've got one more question, Mark, because I know we're coming to the end of this segment, but I've got to know this. So at the end, one of the refrains that we get is that everyone deserves a second chance. I'm curious, Mark, does everyone always deserve a second chance? And what about third chances and fourth chances? Is there ever a time when you kind of run out of chances? Or is the Christian imperative to forgive 7 times 7 times? Is that something that continues in perpetuity? How do we relate to that second chance business as Christians?
Well, I believe everybody potentially deserves a second chance, depending on their owning what the issue that created the need for a second chance is. I think that's essential to getting a second chance. But there is a point at which a person, particularly, when you look at this movie and you look at the High Evolutionary and how abusive he is, there is a point at which everyone doesn't deserve a third or a fourth or a fifth chance, where you recognize them for who they are because they're not owning up to what created the need for a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance, and saying, until you do your own work, until you get the kind of a processing that is necessary, it is not my responsibility to be okay with you. As a matter of fact, good self-care tells me I need to distance myself and to create a space where you don't get any closer than what I get to define that's going to be. That's physically, emotionally, and on all kinds of ways. I don't know. I mean, how do you see that?
Yeah, you're right. You're right on. I think, it depends on the nature of the offense. How badly has someone wronged you, on whether or not they have access to you. But I think putting up a gate there and creating a safe distance, that there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think that cheapens forgiveness. So sometimes,
and it doesn't cheapen love either. You can still love a person and say, I want better for you, but right now you don't get that access to me.
And I think what it is most of the time is people being uncomfortable with that kind of confrontation and setting those boundaries. Because the way
Yeah.
that you just articulated that, Mark, you name the feeling, you name the boundary, and you named how it was going to be enforced. And people
Yeah.
don't really want to do that. What they want is some kind of forgiveness that gets everything back to status quo, even if that is not healthy for you or the other person. And I think
Exactly.
returning to some degree of health is ultimately what forgiveness is about. It's about health for
100%.
yourself, a healthy relationship, health for the other person. And sometimes that includes a real strict setting and enforcing of boundaries. So I think you're right that there's not always the third, fourth chance. And
Right.
that doesn't mean that you're
But
not
that also-
forgiving or
And
loving.
it also doesn't mean that there might not be a seventh or eighth chance down the road once the person does the work that is necessary and have proven in an acceptable way to someone else that that's actually going on. There might be a chance at some point, but I'm with you.
It's not always
I
right
understand.
now. That's another
Not
problem
always
we
right
have,
now.
right? We want immediacy.
Immediate.
Hey, there's a lot here for a
Yes,
superhero
this-
movie. And just as
is.
I would love to geek out with you for an hour about this, I would also like to talk about theology and politics of this for an hour. But you know what? We have another segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, and it would be a real shame not to get to that. Especially since I don't think I stole a single one of your questions today.
You didn't. I have 3 different questions, and you didn't get any of them. So I'm feeling successful just on that alone.
Okay. Hey, let's take another drink, and let's come back for Make Me Look Stupid.
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show's segment of Make Me Look Stupid, where Caleb and I commence to try to make each other look stupid. So I am hosting this segment of the show, and I'm going to take the option to go ahead and ask my question before you steal it. So this is a very simple question. It's not particularly complicated. In Volume 1 of Guardians of the Galaxy, when Rocket is arrested, on his booking sheet, Lila is mentioned as an associate of his. But we now know that she dies before he ever becomes a criminal. How did that happen?
I think the high evolutionary viewed them as criminals because they were trying to escape from the prison of the high evolutionary.
But she was listed as an associate, not as but as someone that he is known to associate with in doing his crimes.
Right, the one crime of breaking free from the jail. They were in a jailbreak together, Mark. What more do you want? So that's all we get for Lila. That's all I know. Do you know anything from the comics? Was Lila a more extended character in the comics?
Honestly, I was never a big Guardians of the Galaxy comic reader. I've got 2 answers to this. One, I think it was just bad writing. Like, I think when they wrote the first one, that they weren't expecting what was going to happen to Lila. In the third one, they didn't they really did think that maybe she was going to be an associate. But if you were to retcon it to try to figure out how to make it work, I think there's a really sad, which fits kind of well with episode 3. I think there's a really sad way of looking at it, and it's that Rocket gets out, he's acting out of his anger and out of his being mad at the whole world, and he gets arrested, and they ask about his associates, and he is so alone in the world that the only name he can think of is Lila, who died, even though he knows that she's not around. So I think you
That's a
can
very
retcon it.
heart-wrenching answer,
I
Mark.
know. I think that's about the only way I can like retcon it and make it work. But I really think it was that when they wrote it the first time, they weren't thinking that she might die so early in
They
Rocket's storyline.
they also probably weren't anticipating someone being quite as attentive as
Maybe not.
as you were.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
And this is a good reason why they have to be very careful
Absolutely.
with the writing. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see, Mark. I've got a question for you.
All right.
So one of maybe the most emotionally satisfying parts of this movie, and an otherwise very kind of gut-wrenching movie, that was Groot. And so I'm going to ask you a feelings question. This is almost never something I do.
Feelings, nothing more than feeling. Okay.
This is Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack by Mark Sandlin.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
put me on it, Coach. Put me on it, Coach. Hey, Gunn.
We finally.
Hey, Gunn, if you're listening, Gunn, I'm your man. Come to me for the next soundtrack.
Yeah, the next one. You've got a whole DC universe that he's going to need to sort. Okay, so Groot. We finally get to understand Groot at the end. I want to know how you felt to understand Groot for the first time, Mark, and what you think the symbolism is there.
A lot of people are saying that Groot learned to talk, like in English. I completely disagree that that's what's going on. There were several times in the movie where we see characters starting to be better at understanding what Groot says. At the end of Volume 1, we have Groot saying, "We are Groot." And I feel like this was, and it was just about the Guardians.
Yeah.
I felt like this was when he says, "I love you guys."
Yeah.
That was our being included in We Are Groot. That was, we have been through 3 Guardians films, a couple other films with him in it, and we are now part of the family, and we now get to understand what he means when he says, "I am Groot." That was my interpretation. I mean,
no, that was, I'm right there with you. I hadn't heard people saying he learned English, because that's
several. I've seen folks that are like, "Oh, isn't it great that Groot is now talking?"
No, that misses. Yeah, I'm with you. This is the point, because whenever I was there, I'm like, we're a part of the Guardians. Like,
exactly.
I'm like,
how cool is that?
All of us here in the theater. Because Gamora throughout the thing said, she kept saying, "How do you guys understand him? You're just making that up, right?" And it wasn't just her understanding it. I think it was all of us. And so, like, for me, that was the emotional closure that I needed for Guardians of the Galaxy. It gave me like, they're all going different ways, but I love you guys. Groot did it for me, and I love that part.
I'm so with you. I'm glad you asked that question. That actually was one of the 3 questions that I had for you, possibly. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Oh man, I should have asked it earlier.
No, I'm glad that I asked. That I decided not to let you ask first, so you could steal one of my questions. All right. So listen, we are back into a little bit of a drought here in terms of big movie releases, or any MCU stuff, any DC stuff, any Disney stuff, any Star Wars stuff, and like. So we need something to watch next week. And you and I have talked a little bit about what we might go to.
Okay, yeah. So this is something that neither one of us have watched yet. So we don't have any opinions going in on. This is on Apple TV. It's called Silo. And here's the description. In a ruined and toxic future, thousands live in a giant silo. Deep underground.
Hence the name. In a giant silo. Sorry, you please continue.
I don't know, Mark. As its sheriff breaks a cardinal rule and residents die mysteriously, engineer Juliet starts to uncover shocking secrets and the truth behind the silo. Okay, so next week, Silo. What do you think, Mark?
I think it'll be fun, and it's not too heavy of an investment for folks. There's only 2 episodes out now. The 3rd one comes out Friday, so we'll do all 3. And yeah, it's another Toxic Future kind of show. But I mean, that's just the cycle we're in right now. And there's probably great reasons for it. So who knows, depending on how they handle it, maybe it's something we'll talk about. But there's been some moderately good reviews about it already. Right now, it's currently a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. So we'll see. I
Hey,
think it could be fun.
I think so too. I'm kind of looking forward to it, and I hope everyone will watch that as well. Hey, Mark, should we tell them about what's coming up in July?
Let's
Should
do.
we remind
Let's
folks
do.
what's happening?
Let's do. We're all excited. I hope that everyone's aware of the Wild Goose Festival, right, Caleb?
I hope so because it is so much fun. We get to
Yeah.
go outside North Carolina. Mark and I are going to be together in person
Woohoo.
again.
For the
It'll
third
be
time ever.
third time ever we're going to be doing this together. And if you're there, we're
Yeah.
going to have a discount code for you soon, but we're going to
Yep.
have lots of awesome swag
Swag.
for anyone who's
Yeah.
there in person, right?
We'll have t-shirts. We're gonna have some Moonshine Jesus jugs. We're gonna have
Yeah.
stickers. We'll probably have some huggies. We're gonna have plenty to give away.
I gotta tell you, those Moonshine Jesus jugs, the jugs in the shape of our Moonshine Jesus logo, are
Yeah.
some of the most popular things. Everyone wants one of these jugs,
Yeah.
and we had a good time drinking from
Yeah.
those. Last
Absolutely.
year,
And
didn't
we'll
we?
have probably, around 24 or so of those to give away. So show up to the show and maybe you'll be one of the lucky folks that get to enjoy it. Matter of fact, I would say show up early because the earlier you get to wherever we get placed in the Wild Goose lineup, the more likely you are to get one of those jugs because they go fast.
Well,
But
I
we're
can't
also
wait.
going to have our classic from the first time that Moonshine Jesus show was around. We created a T-shirt with the jug on it, but the lettering on it simply says "Shine," as in moonshine. Shine, Jesus, shine. Also very popular. We'll have a bunch of those. Last time, every one of them were gone, and people were still asking about them. So again, you want to be there for that.
And there's nothing quite like the looks you get walking down the street with a
True.
Shine Jesus Shine shirt on and a big old moonshine jug.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. All right. We want to thank you all for listening to the show, for tuning in live, or for listening back on your podcast. You are the folks that make this possible. We're so grateful for you. But that said, we will wrap up the show and we'll see you the next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show.